Hello, and welcome to Cedars Unitarian Universalist Church. My name is Johanna Munson, and I am the worship associate for our virtual service today, alongside our minister, Zackrie Vinczen. Before we start, let's pause to acknowledge that members of our congregation occupy the ancestral, traditional, and contemporary lands of the Coast Salish tribes. The homelands of the Suquamish, Duwamish, Klallam, and Timucua people were ceded under duress through the Point No Point and Point Elliott treaties. We are grateful guests on these lands and affirm Indigenous sovereignty, both past and present. This acknowledgement does not substitute for the need to build authentic relationships with modern-day members of these tribes and to learn about their living culture and history. Our faith community is sustained by the generosity of our members. Your contribution will nourish the spiritual growth of our community through weekly worship and ongoing programs that cultivate connection, sharing, belonging, and caring. Included in the video description and displayed on the screen is information to make a contribution to Cedars through our PayPal account. Please take time, either now or later in the service, to make a contribution to help sustain Cedars. Your gifts are greatly appreciated. Cedars is committed to being a welcoming and inclusive community. In all the beauty of languages, cultures, and skin tones that come together in your uniqueness, we welcome you. In all the ways you experience and express gender, and in the beauty of whom and how you love, we welcome you. With all the religious and ethical traditions that inform your spiritual life, we welcome you. You are invited to join us today and always with an open mind, a loving heart, and willing hands. So in our service today, we are talking about All Souls Day, and that is actually November 2nd. I know that today is actually Halloween, and so for all those who are celebrating that day with your family traditions, I honor those. As a former Catholic, I decided just to look into a little bit of what it means to celebrate All Souls Day. And originally, this day was meant for us to pray for the release of souls who have landed in purgatory. Yes, that place, purgatory. Not such a familiar place for Unitarian Universalists, but for those of us who grew up in a tradition where hell was a possibility, you know what I'm talking about. Not many Unitarian Universalists these days would say that they believe in purgatory, right? At least not in the one that comes after life. Maybe some of us think that life on earth can be rather hellish at times. So I decided to take a look in our not Bible, but our book, right, A Chosen Faith, and see if there was any reference to what we might believe as Unitarian Universalists in terms of afterlife. And of course, there's not much there because our faith is drawn from so many traditions and nobody's going to tell us what we should actually believe. We're left to have those discussions and conversations ourselves. The Universalists, of course, believe that we are all beloved, right? In the eyes of God, Spirit, universe, whatever name we call that energy by. But that doesn't really answer the question of what happens to us after death. The humanists came along and they put their trust in science and the observable. Well, depending what your experience is, you may just say there is no evidence for an afterlife. People have these experiences, they're called near-death experiences. Maybe they have they're in an accident or they have surgery and they say that they go beyond the veil and come back. But that is hearsay because nobody really knows. If you're ever interested in talking about those, I have lots of resources to share with you about not only near-death experiences, but also past lives regressions, fascinating subject, at least to me. So I would just like to briefly cover what the four main beliefs about afterlife are, and then Reverend Zackrie and I will have a conversation later in the service about just that topic, afterlife. So the first one is that this is it. There is nothing after we die. Our bodies disintegrate. We don't have such a thing as an everlasting soul. And the beauty in that is that it makes us appreciate this world that we live in. It's fall, and the leaves are gorgeous, and the storm with the leaves swirling around. I love sitting out on my porch and feeling that energy moving. So we might put more energy towards creating the life that we really believe and want to live right now. So one belief is that there is nothing after death. Second one is that there is something, and it could be good, it could be bad. So that's the more traditional Christian view of live a good life so that you don't go to hell, and if you do, that you might not escape that. So more of the sort of punishment, and that's your motivation to live a good life. The third one is that more the universalist view, that we do have a soul, everyone goes to heaven or a good place, whatever their name for it is. But that's it. We don't come back to this world, to this existence in a human body. And then the fourth one is reincarnation, right? It's more of a Buddhist take on life and death. And so there's a sense that our souls are everlasting. The body is a temporary vessel for that soul. And what we do in this life matters because karma, right? You come back, and the form that you come back in is based somewhat on what you did in this life. There's lots of different takes on reincarnation. There's another view that our souls make a contract before we are reborn into a body. We forget that when we're born, and then we spend our life trying to remember that purpose, that contract that we made. And so when we find that purpose, then we are able to fulfill that. And when we die, we might spend some time in the ether as a soul form, but then when we're ready, we come back in a different form. So 4 beliefs: there's nothing, there's something, and it's good or bad. Third one, there's something and it's good. Fourth one, reincarnation. So I was looking through UU materials, through UU World. What can I find that actually has some words for us? So I found an article from 2010 by this guy, Doug Mutter, and he's a contributing writer for the magazine. And I'll leave you with this. In the end, the right question is not how to find the capital T truth about death. That looks to be impossible. The objective, commonly available evidence is not there. A better question is how to affirm and help each other affirm the unique life that each of us has been given and is making.
As we come together to worship, we remind ourselves to treat all people kindly because they are our families, to take good care of the earth because it is our home, and to live lives full of love and goodness because that is how we will all become the best that we can be.
Sing in my heart. everyone, and welcome to our service this morning. As Johanna already told you, today we are going to be talking about All Souls Day and some of the beliefs and traditions and things that surround death. But before we get into that, then exploring the topic, I wanted to take a moment and just say thank you to everyone for your flexibility over the last week. As you know, last Sunday was supposed to be our return to in-person services, our first in-person service in 19 months. And Mother Nature had other plans for us. And so we changed gears and were able to meet last Sunday on Zoom and have a conversation about change and changing gears and the role that force can play in our lives. And it was a very meaningful conversation, and I'm glad that many of you were able to be there. And again, just thank you for all of your flexibility and the support that we showed each other as we figured this out. I promise we'll be back together soon. In fact, we have moved our return to in-person date to November 7th, so that's just around the corner here. And we will plan to hold our water ceremony on that Sunday. And so those of you who do come, please bring a small little bit of water to pour into our communal bowl and celebrate our gathering back together. So, it is officially fall or autumn. As of a few weeks ago, we moved into the autumn season. We've started to see some of those changes happen. Driving into the office, I saw all of the maple trees along 305 with their bright yellow and starting to turn orange leaves. A lot of them are on the ground after the wind recently. And to be honest, this time of year, it feels appropriate to pause and to think about the cycles of life and death. It's in the world around us, those trees, or as I've noticed in my garden as I go out and start preparing everything for winter. And the thing I actually find really meaningful about this time of year and my garden is how I am reminded of life and death existing in a cycle. How it's not the end or the beginning, but somehow these two things connect to each other and form a cycle. To give you an example, this last year in my garden, so last fall, I grew some pumpkins. And it was our first year growing pumpkins like that. And so we saved one of them and saved the seeds from it. And this year planted those seeds, and they have now become new pumpkins. I have a whole wheelbarrow full of them, actually, which is exactly that cycle I'm talking about. This idea that the pumpkin from last year, the harvest from last year, could then become new life and the harvest again. And that cycle of life and death is very present when we look around in the world and notice the changing of the seasons. And so in the week ahead, I want you to take some time. See if you can notice those places where the cycle of life and death is present. Maybe it's the leaves on the trees, like I mentioned, or something in your own garden. I also think of the sunflowers or the artichokes, all of these things that year after year connect us to life and death. So take some time. See if you can notice this force in the world. And what does it mean to you? So with that, I want to thank you for joining with us for this service and look forward to having a conversation about some of these themes in a little more depth with Johanna later on. But for now, I want to invite you to take a breath with me. Let yourself arrive in this place, in this moment, as we join together to worship. Come, let us worship together.
art thou weary, rest shall be thine, rest shall be thine. Music, source of all gladness, heals thy sadness at her shrine. Music, music ever divine. Music, music calleth with voice divine. When the welcome spring is smiling, and the flowers of earth beguiling, after winter's weary rain, sweetest music doth attend her heavenly harmonies, doth lend her, chanting praises in her train, chanting praises in her train. Art thou troubled? Music will calm thee. Art thou weary? Rest shall be thine, rest shall be thine. Music, source of all gladness, heals thy sadness at her shrine. Music, music ever divine. Music, music calleth with voice divine.
For our spiritual moment, I'd like to share these words by Richard Gilbert, titled, "Life is Always Unfinished Business." In the midst of the whirling day, in the hectic rush to be doing, in the frantic pace of life, pause here for a moment. Catch your breath. Relax your body. Loosen your grip on life. Consider that our lives are always unfinished business. Imagine that the picture of our being is never complete. Allow your life to be a work in progress. Do not hurry to mold the masterpiece. Do not rush to finish the picture. Do not be impatient to complete the drawing. From beckoning birth to dawning death, we are in process and always there is more to be done. Do not let the incompleteness weigh on your spirit. Do not despair that imperfection marks your every day. Do not fear that we are still in the making. Let us instead be grateful that the world is still to be created. Let us give thanks that we can be more than we are. Let us celebrate the power of the incomplete. For life is always unfinished business. I now invite you into a moment of shared silence. Amen. So, Johanna, we are talking about something you're very familiar with. It's a topic you spend a lot of time talking about. I thought maybe first you might mention a little bit about what it is that you do.
Yeah, well, I came to this work as an end-of-life navigator. That's the word I use for it. Some people say death doula or end-of-life doula. I like the word navigator because it is a journey, right?
Yeah.
We journey from birth into young adulthood, older adulthood, and then all of us at some point lose body function and end up dying. And so people need help in that journey. And because of my life experience, both with deaths of my in-laws and my parents, but also the experiences I've had with surgeries. I've been near death several times, and luckily the treatments worked and surgeries worked, and I am still here.
Yeah. So, yeah, and I mean, I think death is something we all at some point are touched by. I mean, personally as well as people in our lives. And I think it's also, it's a hard thing for a lot of people to talk about. And so I think that's one of the reasons the work you do is very important. To dive in though, what happens when we die?
Well, it depends who you ask.
So what do you think happens?
I am in the camp of the last group that I mentioned in reincarnation. My spiritual journey is long and varied. I started out in Mormon tradition and was very much into that. I don't remember much about what they believe, but that spiritual tradition, having something to believe in, I felt was really important. I got very involved in Catholicism in high school, but then I went to college and started studying Japanese and Buddhism. Lived in Japan for 5 years total, and I think that's where the idea of reincarnation really started to make more sense. I became fluent in Japanese. Very few non-native speakers manage that, and I'm kind of a past life regression person where maybe I was Japanese in another life, and there are just too many coincidences, synchronicities in my life. So that's, I believe in reincarnation.
Yeah.
How about you?
Just, I was thinking, I'm like, I think I have a little bit of a reincarnation bent, and I've told my husband a few times, when I die, there are two things that I would like done. One of two things done with my body. The first is science. Just give my body to science. If I can be of help to someone else, research, I feel like that's some good karma. But the other is, I'm like, just bury me in a hole and plant a tree over me. And I think partly it's that to be reabsorbed into nature, to become part of a new tree. And I don't always know spiritually like what happens with my personality, but the energy, the essence of who I am, I do think gets recycled, it gets reused, it gets
Yeah.
put back into something new, into new life. But I'm still not sure what exactly how that happens.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
In the Waldorf tradition, they say that the earth needs our bodies
yeah,
because there is that exchange of matter, and energy cannot be created or destroyed, right? That's basic physics. And so why not put that energy back into the earth? My dad was the first one buried in the green burial part of Hilltop Cemetery over on Old Mill Road.
Yeah.
And the local funeral home is just so, there's like, they can't, they have to keep expanding the green burial
Yeah.
part because so many people want that. That's what, we used to do with bodies. The
Yeah.
tradition of embalming started during the Civil War when people were dying far from home and people wanted to bring their bodies back to be buried at home. And
Yeah.
that's how the whole funeral home tradition got started. And so death is now really removed from just our daily lives, right? People used to die at home. They used to get sick at home. Children saw this happening. And so, how do we even talk to kids about death and explain what it means to not be in this body anymore when they're so separated from that experience?
What impact do you think having that experience or the presence of death, and especially when we're talking the bodily aspect, having that removed from our lives, what impact do you think that has?
There's so much fear. I think the biggest impact is that we are afraid of death. We're even afraid of talking about death. And that's one of the things I come up against with getting the word out that, it's okay to have these conversations. It's really taking that first step, crossing that threshold of this is something that's going to happen to me, and I may not have a whole lot of control over it, but it's something to think about. And, this idea of a good death, you cannot guarantee that we will have what we want, but the more that we are willing to talk about what we envision, the more that we realize we have some agency, like where we want to die. Do we want to go into the hospital? 80% of people say they want to die at home, but 75% die in the hospital. That's an awful juxtaposition of desire versus reality. Right?
Yeah. No, and I think too that's death kind of feels alien because it's not present in the way that we in our homes in the way it used to. And I remember in seminary, one of the things I a few times got to participate in Muslim funeral services where the body was very present in a way that I had not experienced, and we all came forward at a certain time, and I personally found it very humbling. But it is still, it can still be a little scary. So I'm curious, what do you think our relationship is with people who have died?
That is one of my favorite topics because I definitely believe that there is communication across the veil. Especially this time of year, right? It's halfway between the fall equinox and the winter solstice. So this is like the midpoint right now, right? And so that's why we say that the veil is so thin, because it's one of the 8 points of the year. We're used to thinking of maybe 4 points, but when you add in those interim points, it's like, wow, this is a transition, another transition, more change, right? But for me, really, anytime I want to communicate with my beloved parents, sometimes not so beloved, but, they're human, I'm human. I reach out. Sometimes they're there. Sometimes maybe they're talking to others. I've gotten in touch with my grandparents, great-grandparents, and, sometimes I ask it for advice. Sometimes I just try to get a sense of where they might point me if I'm feeling confused. I truly believe that on the other side, we see the world differently, right?
Yeah.
In life, we might have done some things that were not healthy, had some habits, had some, relationships that didn't go well. But the people who have passed just love us with such deep, deep love. And so they only want the best for us. They're never going to say, you shouldn't be that way or criticize us. They just want the best for us. And so, I light a candle. That's often how I start. And then I just sit quietly and say, sometimes I just check in. Who's there?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I get messages for other people too. Just this morning, I was talking with a young woman whose dad is in the hospital, kind of halfway between worlds, and just shared some messages for her. And, you can believe it or not, but to me, it really helps. It really makes me feel stronger.
I think, so a core experience in my life, and I've shared this in Cedars before, but was, as a child, the death of my father.
Mm-hmm.
And it's always been interesting for me because he was someone I didn't know really at all.
Mm-hmm.
And yet I still feel a certain closeness with him.
Yeah.
And I would say that similar with his father, my grandfather, who I was close with.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it feels like a presence,
Mm-hmm.
A reminder. I know in moments when I'm not sure what to do, I find myself sort of like wanting my grandpa there, and it can feel like that love that you're talking about, that feeling of, oh, there's someone who loves me, that is connected to me, and yet it's still a mystery.
I know. I know. How can this be, right?
Yeah.
But again, there's that, reality that energy is constant, and so it's got to go somewhere. And it's very comforting to me. And if anybody is curious about what to do, like I said, just sit and just close your eyes and visualize that person, and say, are you there? And see what happens.
Yeah. So I was thinking about, we're having this conversation about death, and you and I have had some of these conversations before, and I'm curious, though, for people who maybe don't have these sort of conversations all the time, what might be a gentle step to start being able to talk about death?
That's a great question. I just was thinking about this. And one way is if you feel the urge to have a conversation, but maybe somebody you're with is not so open to it, use a prop. And it may be something like an actual physical item from that person's life, and tell a story, or ask, like I could, have something of my grandmother's and ask my mom about it if she were still alive, and just say, what do you know about this, and what do you know about her life, and then lead into, well, what was your experience with her death, or did you ever have a conversation about death?
Yeah.
So an item or even a photo, asking about the end of life of a loved one. How did it go? Is there anything you would change, that you would do differently? But it really is just making that decision that it's okay to talk. Here we are having this conversation, and we're still here. We're not falling on the floor. We're not, in a puddle of tears or anything, right? It's okay. It's really okay.
And I think as someone who grew up in one of those families that we didn't talk about death, and as I mentioned, it being a central feature in my early life, I found that talking about death as an adult, as a minister, has become very important. I also think that there are times that it's humbling in a way that knowing that I'm going to die sometimes reminds me of how precious life is.
Yes.
And I mean, we've talked about ideas of what happens, but until we go through it, we don't know. And I think that knowing, though, that we have this time and that we don't know when it ends makes it very special to me.
Yes, I have several grounding practices that I do every morning just to say, yes, I'm here, I'm alive. I walk outside barefoot.
Yeah.
And I was just thinking about this in the summertime. The grass was crunchy and dry. And I remember so clearly the first time that there was dew on the grass. And it wasn't so, like, not really uncomfortable, but just noticeable. You know,
Yeah.
there was actually softness there instead of that crunchy
Crunchy.
texture. And now with the rain and the grass in my lawn is high, I have to roll up my pants so that my legs don't get sopping wet.
Mushy.
And just being present to that, to the magic. I mean, we live in this gorgeous, gorgeous part of the world. And that's what awareness of death really does bring, is just that ability to be present.
Yeah.
And to appreciate people, location, scenery, opportunities that we have, relationships. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you. Is there any final things that you would like to share with us at Cedars?
Well, I bring it back to what we talked about change, right?
Yeah.
Change is inevitable. There is a cycle of life. If we can see our existence as the form that we're in now, that form is going to change. And it's just how it is. And be present, be appreciative, be grateful.
That's another reminder to learn to embrace change.
Yes, exactly.
Thank you, Johanna.
Thank you.
This is a great conversation.
Appreciate it.
When I am frightened, will you reassure me? When I'm uncertain, will you hold my hand? Will you be strong for me? Sing to me quietly. Will you
We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Our service has ended, but our service to the world and one another begin anew. As long as we are on this earth, our life and the business that we have to attend to is unfinished. Life is a process that we are engaged in. As we go forth, may we take on that role to be co-creators engaged in the process of creation that we are called to. May it be so.